liberationists if they thought about that. Shh! Quiet, woman. Women's liberationists.
Why would the king of late night, Johnny Carson, ban some of the biggest stars in the world? It wasn't just about bad interviews. It was about loyalty, respect, and power. We've dug into the archives to find 8 guests who were permanently blacklisted by Johnny himself. The reasons are shocking and the consequences were devastating. And the story for guest number 5 is a jaw-dropping moment of live TV chaos that ended everything for them. You'll be stunned by who crossed the line and how they did it. Number 1. Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers wasn't just another comedian on The Tonight Show, she was family. At least that's what everyone thought. Johnny Carson didn't just give her a platform, he basically made her career. He had handpicked her, mentored her, and eventually made her the very first permanent guest host in the show's history. This was a huge deal. It made her one of the most powerful women in comedy practically overnight. What most people don't realize is how deep their bond went. Carson was like a father figure to her. In an industry that wasn't always kind to female comics, Johnny championed her. He advised her on her jokes, invited her to private dinners, and praised her to everyone. Joan often said he was the first powerful man who supported her just for her talent. She was deeply loyal to him, and that's putting it lightly. So here's the deal. In 1986, the new Fox network came to Rivers with an offer that was impossible to ignore. They wanted to give her her very own late-night talk show, one that would air at the same time as Carson's. The reported salary was $10 million a year. This was a mind-blowing amount of money, enough to make her the highest-paid person in late night, but it wasn't just about the money. Joan was worried about her future. NBC had quietly let it be known that when Johnny retired, she would not be considered as his replacement. The Fox offer was her one chance at security. She took the deal, but she had a huge problem: how to tell Johnny. She was, by all accounts, terrified of the conversation. She delayed, trying to find the perfect time, the perfect words. But that moment never came. Before she could tell him, Fox leaked the news to the press. The crazy part is how Johnny found out. He didn't get a call from his protege. He read it in a Variety magazine headline. For a man like Carson, who was famously private and had deep-seated issues about loyalty, this was the worst betrayal possible. A staff member who was there said Johnny's face went white. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just said, "She didn't even call me," and walked into his office. Rivers finally called him just moments after he found out. She tried to explain. He listened for a few seconds, said, "I'm very disappointed," and hung up the phone. She called back thinking they got disconnected. He hung up on her again. That was the last time they ever spoke. Carson's response was not just swift, it was total. He ordered that Joan Rivers' name never be spoken on The Tonight Show again. All clips of her were pulled. Guest hosts were told not to mention her. It was as if she had never existed. He told his producer, "She's dead to me." Rivers tried everything to apologize. She sent letters, she sent gifts. Everything came back marked "Return to Sender." The ban was so complete that her career went into a nosedive. Being blacklisted by Johnny meant being blacklisted by half of Hollywood. The ban lasted for the rest of Carson's life. Joan Rivers did not appear on The Tonight Show again until 2014, 22 years after Carson retired and 9 years after he had passed away. This betrayal was personal, but the next guest made it physical. Number 2. Wayne Newton. Wayne Newton, Mr. Las Vegas, was a frequent target of Johnny's monologue. For years, Carson had made jokes about Newton's flashy Vegas image, his high-pitched voice, and his suspiciously youthful appearance. These were pretty standard jokes for the time, but then the jokes started to change. Carson began making comments and insinuations about Newton's personal life. In that era, such jokes could be devastating to an entertainer's career, especially one who relied on a conservative middle America fan base. Newton was not happy, but here's the catch. He didn't call his manager, he didn't send an angry letter, he decided to handle it in person. One day, Wayne Newton showed up unannounced at the NBC studios in Burbank. He used his celebrity status to get past the front desk and made his way straight to Carson's private office. He walked in without knocking and found Johnny sitting at his desk, going over his monologue cards for that night's show. Johnny looked up surprised, but at first he was friendly. That changed fast. According to Newton himself, he told Carson, "You can make fun of my music, you can make fun of my hair, but if you ever make another joke about my personal life, I'll beat you up." You have to understand, Johnny Carson was not a man to be threatened. What most people don't realize is that Carson was a U.S. Navy veteran from World War II. He was a tough guy from Nebraska, and he was significantly taller than Newton. Carson stood up very slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked down at Newton and said, "Get out of my office before I have you thrown out." The confrontation ended right there, but the consequences were permanent. Carson went straight to his producers and told them Wayne Newton was never to be invited on The Tonight Show ever again. Period. Johnny could handle jokes, he could handle criticism. But a direct physical threat in his own office? That was a line you could never ever uncross. The ban lasted for the rest of Carson's 30-year career. Newton used threats, but the next guest used a different weapon: awkwardness. Number 3. Charles Grodin. On paper, the actor Charles Grodin was a perfect guest. He was smart, he was witty, and he had a dry sense of humor that seemed to match Johnny's. But Grodin had an interesting idea for his appearances. Instead of being the friendly, thankful actor telling funny stories, Grodin decided to play a character. His bit was to be an aggressively difficult and argumentative guest. The first time he did it, Johnny was caught off guard, but he played along. Carson was a master at improvisation, and he understood what Grodin was doing. It was uncomfortable, but it was also funny. The audience loved the tension. So Grodin got invited back, and each time he pushed the difficult persona a little further. The light sparring turned into Grodin openly questioning Carson's interviewing skills. He would suggest Johnny hadn't bothered to read his book or accuse him of not really caring about his guests. Yeah, about that. The problem was the line between the act and reality started to get very blurry. To the audience at home, it just looked like this guy was being a total jerk to America's favorite host. The breaking point came in 1990. Grodin's act went from funny uncomfortable to just uncomfortable. He started mocking Carson's delivery. He suggested Johnny was just faking his famous warmth and just going through the motions for a paycheck. And get this, he was hitting on Carson's deepest insecurity. Johnny was a famously private and distant man. He had been married 4 times. He was sensitive to any suggestion that his on-air charm was all fake. Johnny's smile got very tight. The crew knew this tight smile. It meant he was done. He played along until the commercial break. The second the camera's red light went off, he turned to his producer and said, "We're done with that." Just 4 words, but everyone knew exactly what it meant. Grodin wasn't told he was banned, he just never got invited back. His publicists would call and the show's bookers would politely say the schedule was full, it was a soft ban. Johnny had simply decided the bit wasn't funny anymore and it wasn't worth the personal discomfort. Grodin made Johnny uncomfortable, but our next guest just plain annoyed him. Number 4. Rich Little. For more than a decade, the impressionist Rich Little was one of Johnny's absolute favorite guests. He was a guaranteed home run. He appeared on The Tonight Show more than 30 times. He was reliable, the audience loved him, and he and Johnny seemed to be good friends. Then one day, he just vanished from the show. There was no on-air fight, no backstage showdown. He just stopped appearing. It was one of the most mysterious bans in the show's history. Rich Little himself said he was confused. He just kept waiting for the call, and it never came again. So what happened? It turns out there were 2 big reasons. The first was personal. According to producers, Johnny found Rich Little incredibly annoying off camera. Little had a habit of staying on all the time. He was constantly doing his impressions, even when the cameras were off. In the green room, in rehearsals, during commercial breaks. What audiences found funny for 10 minutes, Johnny had to deal with for hours. Carson was a very private guy. He valued real, authentic conversation. He got tired of Little's constant need for attention. A writer said he once heard Johnny mutter, "Does he even have his own voice?" But the second reason was the real career ender. What most people don't realize is that Johnny Carson had an almost photographic memory for comedy. He could remember jokes from years earlier, and he became convinced that Little was recycling material. He was telling the same jokes, using the same impressions with only tiny changes. To Carson, this was a cardinal sin. He was obsessed with fresh material. He saw this perceived laziness as an insult to him, to the show, and to the audience. So instead of a big fight, Johnny just told his bookers to stop calling. It was another soft ban. Johnny just decided, I think we've seen enough of Rich for a while. And that while turned out to be forever. Being annoying gets you banned, but what this next guest did was a live TV disaster. Number 5. Shelley Winters. This is the one. The on-air moment so bad it didn't just get a guest banned, it destroyed their career. Shelley Winters was a 2-time Oscar winner, a Hollywood legend. But by the 70s, she was also known for being wildly unpredictable, especially if she was under the influence. On this 1975 night, she was clearly under the influence. She was unsteady, slurring, and interrupting Johnny. Johnny, the total pro, tried to save the interview. He made a light joke, one she had laughed at before, but this time Winters didn't laugh. She snapped. In front of millions, she picked up her full glass of whiskey and threw the entire drink right in Carson's face. The audience gasped. Dead silence. Johnny sat there drenched and in shock. He called for a commercial, walked off the set, and Winters was immediately escorted out. Carson finished the show, but the fallout was immediate. Winters was banned for life. The incident damaged her reputation, her film roles dried up, and it became a career-ending disaster. A drink to the face is bad, but the next guest was in even worse shape. Number 6. Truman Capote. Truman Capote, the genius writer behind In Cold Blood, had been a talk show favorite for his sharp wit. But by 1975, Capote was in a deep spiral of substance abuse. His handlers let him go on anyway. It was an immediate disaster. He was unsteady and his speech was nearly impossible to understand. Johnny hated showing guests who were clearly incapacitated. The interview was a train wreck. Capote couldn't finish a sentence and told rambling, inappropriate stories. Johnny tried to guide him, but nothing worked. He finally cut Capote off and threw to a commercial, ending the 10-minute segment after just 4. Afterward, Johnny was furious, mostly at Capote's handlers. He banned the writer for life. Appearing that impaired was a sign of total disrespect to the show and the audience. But the next guests brought a fight Johnny wanted no part of. Number 7. The Smothers Brothers. Tom and Dick Smothers were a cultural movement, famous for their political anti-war comedy that got their own show canceled. Johnny, on the other hand, hated serious politics. He believed his show should be an escape. But in 1970, the brothers came on with an agenda. Instead of light banter, Tom Smothers launched into an anti-war speech. You could see Johnny's smile go cold. He hated being ambushed with politics backstage. He was furious. What followed wasn't a hard ban. It was Carson Purgatory, a soft blacklisting where the schedule was always full. They were eventually told they could return, but only if they stuck to non-controversial comedy. Johnny banned them for trying to turn his entertainment show into a political one. They were banned for being too serious, but the final guest was banned for being a total circus. Number 8. Morton Downey Jr. Morton Downey Jr. was the face of shock TV, loud, rude, and confrontational. Everything Johnny was not. Staff begged Johnny not to book him, but Carson was curious. He regretted it immediately. Downey walked on stage and immediately tried to take over the set, playing to the crowd. Johnny's expression went arctic. The interview was a disaster. Downey interrupted Johnny, yelled at the audience, and insulted other hosts, implying Carson was a coward. Johnny disengaged, the sign he was done, and cut the segment short with a polite, cold, "Thank you." Backstage, Johnny was blunt. That's not television, it's a circus act. Downey was banned. Johnny saw him as a threat to civility and wit on television. The thing is, looking back at all these, you have to wonder, was Carson just a man protecting his show's quality, or was he a king who was so powerful he simply couldn't handle any challenge to his throne? So, was Carson a TV genius protecting his show, or just a powerful man who couldn't take a joke? Let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe.